Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Nowrasteh, and I'm a policy analyst at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm trained as an economist. I attended the London School of Economics, where I got my Master's of Science in Economic History. Prior to that, I was at the George Mason University. I've been working on immigration issues, specifically the economics of immigration, for the last few years now. My presentation is about the economic perils of restricting immigration and how immigration restrictions hurt specifically Americans, immigrants, and economic growth across the United States and in Arizona. Fundamental American freedoms of life, liberty, and private property are what allowed people of the United States to build the wealth that we have today. And Arizona's story is really just a great microcosm of that success. Through ingenuity and hard work, made possible by freedom and capitalism, Arizonans have turned a desert literally into an oasis. My presentation will begin with explaining why immigration is good for our economy. I explain immigrant entrepreneurship, how industries in Arizona are most affected by immigration, and then explain the economic harm of immigration restrictions. This first slide right here shows how economists think about immigrants and how immigration benefits the U.S. Quite frankly, people are the ultimate resource. People invent, create, work, consume, and literally build everything around us. There are no examples throughout history of countries with shrinking or stagnant populations that also have growing economies. Immigration is just a quicker way of getting the people we need to grow our economy. Immigrants are businessmen and employers. Immigrants are consumers of American goods and services. Immigrants rent property from American property owners. Immigrants invest in businesses large and small in the United States and are at the center of all economic activity. One thing that's often ignored in this debate is the role that immigrants play as entrepreneurs. According to the Kauffman Foundation, 620 immigrants out of every 100,000 start a new business in the U.S. every month. By comparison to native-born Americans are less than half as entrepreneurial. So immigrants, especially from places like Mexico, are more entrepreneurial because on average they have more skills, are better educated, and more ambitious and younger than their typical countrymen that they leave behind. Now I want to contrast that idea with that quote at the bottom by Russell Pierce that says, they're leaving in caravans. I talked to the U-Haul dealer. He said business has never been better. Generally, when the only business that's booming in your town is that which is trying to get people out of there, you have a serious economic problem. And that, I think, is one part of what's problem in Arizona right now. So I think to also understand the impact that immigrants have on the economy in Arizona, you need to see where immigrants work and where they're concentrated in. So 59% of them work in agriculture. And what we've seen from immigration restrictions in the U.S. is that a lot of them have really destroyed farms and decreased the acreage in the state of Arizona by these restrictions, these laws. So since the Employer Sanctions Act was passed in 2007, you've seen total acreage in the state of Arizona decrease by about 18,000 acres. That's affected some crops more than others, mostly fruits, sort of intensive human labor. We've seen those industries suffer quite a bit due to a lack of labor. 27% of immigrants also work in construction. Now, we all know that the construction industry has been decimated by the housing collapse since 2007, 2008. But in places like Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and other places that have stricter immigration laws, it's very difficult for contractors to legally find the labor they need to repair buildings and to repair things that happen from, say, tornado damage. Now, 40% of immigrants also work in manufacturing, science, and research. What these three numbers up there show is that immigrants are concentrated on the low end of the spectrum and at the high end of the spectrum. So you have a lot of people, a lot of immigrants who work in science and research and technology and manufacturing, and then you have a lot working on sort of the lower end, less skilled jobs. So you don't see many people in the middle. What's interesting is most Americans are somewhere in the middle. We have a little bit of college education or a college degree, but most of us are not PhDs, and most of us have at least more than a high school degree. Immigrants fall on either wing of that, so we don't really compete with each other. And I want to say a little bit about many of the other free marketeers and sort of pro-capitalist people who are sometimes on the opposite side of me on this issue. Is labor accounts for about 2/3 of GDP in the United States. So if we like free trade, which I do and most economists do, we should probably want to expose the largest part of our economy to international free trade in terms of labor by opening up immigration. So here are lists of many of the different types of responses that the government has to undocumented immigration in the United States. Many of them have different costs and consequences and hurt businesses and workers to different degrees. Workplace raids, to begin with, are very, very expensive. In 2010, there were over 25,000 workplace raids just for H-1B visas. Since the election of Barack Obama, his administration has also specialized in doing these remote audits. ICE and the Justice Department audit 1,000 employers at a time from a distance to try to determine if they are employing undocumented immigrants. If they are, they basically send a letter to the employer saying you have to fire these people or you're going to face severe fines and penalties. So that's been one way that the Obama administration has substantially stepped up immigration enforcement. Another type that we're all familiar with are I-9 forms. Since the 1986 amnesty law, employers are required to check the ID of workers to make sure they're legal to work, and that's a part of the law for all workers in the United States and all employees. We've also seen increased restrictions and fees for work visas. So since 2008, we've seen some fees for visas that you have to pay more than double. This also is combined with increased wait times and more paperwork. Something called National Biometric Identity Program, where the government would basically take a sample of your DNA, your retinal scans, your fingerprints, to confirm that the person who is seeking that job is actually that person. So you could check their DNA against the actual person to make sure that they're legally able to work in the United States. That's supposed to close some loopholes. That's sort of being tried out right now. It's being planned to be tried out right now in a pilot program. And this brings us, I think, to the one system that everybody in Arizona knows intimately, and that's called E-Verify. Just to catch up everybody here who doesn't know about it, E-Verify is an electronic employment verification system run by the federal government. It links up all data from the Immigration Services, Department of Homeland Security, the Social Security Administration, and other agencies to verify that a worker is eligible for legal employment in the United States. E-Verify is also slowly being combined with state-level records from the DMV to the so-called RIDE initiative. Arizona made E-Verify mandatory when it passed the Employer Sanctions Law in 2007. SB 1070 then strengthened E-Verify. But this means that since you all have some experience in it, when a business has a new hire who wants to hire an employee, the businessman is supposed to take the identity information provided by the worker and check it against the government database through a free online interface. Most of the time, the worker is employed. About 95.9% of the time, the first time, the worker is approved and everything worked fine. But too often, the worker is not approved. If the worker cannot prove that he is really authorized to work in a timely manner, he's not legally allowed to be employed. So 4.1% of the time, according to the 2009 audit by the research service Westat, E-Verify is just flat out wrong. 54% of the time, unauthorized workers are not even caught by the system. So they're approved even though they're not authorized to work. But more worrying, and I think worse for the system, is that 1%, about 1% of legal American workers are flagged as unauthorized to work. This means that if you're a legal American worker, you're unauthorized to work, you have to go fix your problem with the Social Security Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, and these other agencies to try to figure out what's wrong. Now, according to the GAO, if you want to figure out what's wrong with your information in the government database, that requires something called a Privacy Act request, because the government can't actually tell you what information it has about you that's wrong that would violate your privacy. But so it takes 104 days to figure out through a Privacy Act request exactly what's wrong. What's worse is that the government can only delay 120 days for you to figure out what's wrong before you have to be fired. Now, talking about that 1% error rate, just imagine if any other large database of personal information was wrong 1% of the time. If your bank gave you incorrect information 1% of the time. Imagine how furious you would be at that. You'd probably want to find another bank. But E-Verify is run by the government and you don't have a choice. So what are you going to do? If 200 million legal Americans are run through E-Verify, at least 1.4 million are going to be flagged as unauthorized. The experience of many businesses using E-Verify is even worse than that. Another firm, which operates in Arizona, reported that 14% of its workers were not confirmed. Worse, non-confirmation for legal foreign workers was 75%, because E-Verify's database is not updated enough to be acceptably accurate. Now, one issue that a lot of people have pointed out is that E-Verify seems to sort of flag Hispanic workers more often than not as being not legal. I don't think this is intentional discrimination. One study found that the reason why E-Verify is so bad with Hispanic names is that when you enter hyphens into the system, it doesn't work very well. For some reason, E-Verify just hates hyphens. So if you've got a hyphen in your name, you're going to be in big trouble if you try to use E-Verify. This is just some of the bureaucratic steps for E-Verify that must be followed by employees who claim to be an American citizen on their I-9 form. The Government Accountability Office, which did the report. So this is just a great way of showing how bureaucratic the system is. This is the bureaucratic process for E-Verify that must be followed when the employee claims to be a legal immigrant. That is a legal foreign worker on their I-9. As you can see, there's a lot of highly complex bureaucratic maneuvers, especially if something goes wrong that you have to go through. And these costs mostly affect small businesses. Large companies already have HR staffs. They already have lawyers on hand to figure out problems with E-Verify. But small firms do not have that. Small firms don't have rooms full of lawyers and HR staff sitting around waiting to solve problems. Small businesses are lean and mean. They have to be able to compete. So small businessmen and entrepreneurs should be the most concerned with managing their businesses and expanding them, not with complying with burdensome new government rules and regulations. Small businesses are literally the backbone of our economy. Most economic growth and job creation comes from them. So we shouldn't be creating these new regulations to smother them with. E-Verify is just another big barrier to hiring people, another cost on the road to economic recovery. And I think in the United States right now, when we have an unemployment rate above 9%, we shouldn't be making it more difficult with laws to make businesses hire people. So all of you out there are probably thinking, there's a difference between legal immigration and illegal immigrant. And my answer is yes, of course you're right. If that man follows all of the legal steps to get here, to get a green card, I'm not even talking about citizenship, just the legal steps to get a green card, it will take him more than 130 years to get it. Now let me say that again, it's 130 years. When you hear about bureaucracy in other countries being bad and how it takes decades or months to set up a business or to get anything done with bureaucracy, you usually hear about months and years. American immigration law is like a third world legal system. When it takes 130 years for somebody to come in legally, no wonder why we have an undocumented immigration problem. And if you look at that number that's second to the last for the Indian computer engineers, that number is about a year and a half, 2 years old. Now it's about a 70-year wait for Indian engineers who want to come here and work. And that's why I think the law needs to change. The federal government needs to increase the number of green cards and work permits available, lower the fees and regulations surrounding them, and make them available to more people. They need to make it so that an 18-year-old Mexican man I described previously, who has a high school degree, can legally come to the U.S. without having to hike through the desert or break the law or fly in on a tourist visa and overstay. That will siphon undocumented immigration from the illegal black market into the legal market and will end the undocumented immigration problem overnight. That's the reason why most of our ancestors, were not illegal immigrants back in the day, was because the United States had open immigration for people who were peaceful, people who were healthy. It's my contention that we should return to that ideal and traditional American immigration system and get away from this system up here on the screen, which is a bureaucratic nightmare for everyone involved. And that concludes my presentation.